Wasabi guys, Void here coming back at y'all with another video. This is something I think is pretty important, especially for newer players. You don't always have the best direction when it comes to commander options, and I see a lot of the same mistakes happen and people expect different results. And it really comes down to the simplicity of your commander. And what I mean by simplicity is, does your commander really work out in multiple different situations, or is it rather linear? Is it going to do one thing really well and not really much of anything else really well? Take for instance just about every single Voltron commander. Now, while not every single commander option that's a Voltron is going to be linear, most of them happen to be linear because they're all around the same strategy, trying to pump themselves up in order to deal commander damage. That's the whole purpose. You don't really want to focus on anything else anyway, but it can definitely leave you wide open and susceptible to other strategies, which is why I have to stress this. If you are frustrated with the commander format and you are a newer player, do not give up, because it may not be you, it may just be the decks, the commanders that you're choosing. Now, the whole purpose of this video is going to be linear versus non-linear commanders and the major differences between them. One of my favorite commander options that I like to go over whenever I talk about non-linear or very flexible is going to be Oloro Ageless Ascetic. Now, he is very much a hated commander option in this format. A lot of people don't like the fact that you just gain 2 life during your upkeep just having this guy as your commander, but that is easily the most overrated thing about him. If you had to ask me what the best thing about him is, it's going to be the fact that he has an incredibly high ceiling. All the way back in Commander 2013, I guarantee you we did not have half of the support that we have for Oloro that we have now. A lot of those cards you see in Oloro decks now have been provided to us since that time. So you see a lot of cards that are going to deal with life gain. You see a lot of cards that are going to deal with control, counter spells, removal spells. So it's not so much about just the life gain trigger during your upkeep, but rather the hardcore control colors, as well as finding a sub theme that you want to work with. It could be life gain, it doesn't have to be. I've seen some mill decks for Oloro, some janky stacks decks, but it's definitely a commander option that is wide open, as well as one that is capable of finding new support in newer sets. Because when you look at gaining life, it's something that you're always going to see in sets, because lifelink is likely going to be a keyword for the long term. We're going to see this in the next set. We're going to see this in the set after that. We may not see something that combos with life gain or interacts with life gain in a really busted way, but the chances of us finding a card to throw into this deck supporting this commander is almost a guarantee. He really casts a net that is that wide to where it doesn't really matter if it's super complicated or not, it's going to find a place in the deck. Now, something very specific and linear, aside from Voltron, would have to be tribal, because if you're talking about tribal decks, the whole purpose is building a deck around that one creature type, which is very specific, way more specific than lifelink and control. So something like the Dragon is incredibly linear, because while you could put some control, while you could put some support cards in there, for the most part, if you are not adhering to that dragon tribal strategy, your deck isn't going to be as good, your commander isn't going to be as effective. So fooling around with all these different cards just isn't as great of a possibility as it is with Oloro. So keep that in mind, but you also have some other good commander options. Another favorite of mine being Prosh, Skyraider of Care. I've mentioned this guy a whole bunch of times because the strategy isn't just good creatures, it isn't just tokens, what you would interpret at face value. When I look at Prosh, I see a whole bunch of different things. When someone else they might just see, oh, he's a sack outlet, he makes himself bigger, kind of like fire breathing, and he can deal commander damage. While you could most certainly try to make a Voltron deck with Prosh, and I've seen them work pretty well, Prosh is really good at synergizing with multiple different things, which makes him a very non-linear commander. And if you were to look again at a lot of the most recent sets and future sets, you're going to see a lot of good cards to throw into a Prosh deck. You're going to see cards that synergize with death triggers, you're going to see cards that synergize with ETBs all the time, and you of course have some big creature synergies as well. You have a lot of token production here, so something like a Craterhoof Behemoth, creatures that are going to pump them up, that's always going to be needed in that deck. And I don't want you guys to think that it's a black and white thing here, because there are definitely some gray areas where I would think that a lot of commanders fall into, such as Animar, Soul of Elements. While he's definitely a very linear strategy, playing creatures, that's about the gist of the deck. There's some that play more creatures than others, but that seems to be the general consensus. You want this to be a creature-based deck. He does, however, open himself up for future support pretty well, because creatures like lifelink are going to be a thing for the long term. You're always going going to see some good creatures, you're always going to see some massive creatures. They may not be as powerful as the Eldrazi, but you can almost guarantee we're going to see them. Now, I would still consider Animar to be a linear commander, don't get me wrong, but you also have to pick a commander with the expectation of upgrading that commander for the future. And some of the most rewarding experiences when it comes to deck building is always finding new stuff and newer sets to throw into my decks. And that's why I have to stress, it's not just about non-linear commanders, but it's about commanders that you honestly feel like you could play for years to come. I'm not the type of person that feels like spending a few $100s on a good commander deck just to have it gather dust. I don't really find myself interested in it anymore because a lot of support was from a few years ago. It hasn't gotten any recent support. I run into that issue all the time. So there are multiple different variables that you have to take into account. It's not just about the commander option being cool. It's not just about it being effective, but it's about it being able to grow, being able to expand and interact with other things in a different way. A commander option that may not look that good a few sets ago suddenly got some more support and now it looks pretty impressive. That happens all the time. We see some commanders just come out of nowhere, start to see some more popularity because of a rule change. Those are a little bit harder to predict though. Something like Captain Saisei or Empress Galena, very out there commander options before the legend rule changed for planeswalkers, but after that rule change, those commanders saw a lot more play, at least Captain Saisei did. So when you're looking for a brand new commander, if you're looking for a new commander to build around, it may seem like the easiest thing to do, especially if you're playing on a budget, to go with something very simplistic. You don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money to make a linear commander deck. Well, the same is also true for non-linear commanders. I find that to be the case for both different decks, but a lot of people are probably confused and they'll say, oh, well, I'm just playing this commander because it's really budget, it's super easy, but these are a lot of the same people that tell me that they don't enjoy these commanders, they don't enjoy playing commander, they never really are able to compete. So this video was mainly for those people who are having those struggles, and while money is always going to be a factor, I'm not going to lie to you, most good commander decks are going to cost you at least a good few $100s. There are ways outside of money that you can make these decks good, and it usually comes down to whether your commander option is linear versus non-linear. It isn't always the case, but most of the time in my playing experience, I have found that going with a non-linear commander option opens you up to possibilities, not just in deck building, but also in gameplay. You're able to interact with your opponent's decks a lot better than you would be with a more linear commander. But of course, decks are a lot more than just the commander itself, so always keep in mind, it doesn't necessarily matter what the commander you have, you also have to focus on the deck built around that commander. I'm only talking about commanders for the sole purpose of ability to build around it and have that deck synergize pretty well. But it's always going to come down to deck building. It's always going to come down to your choices, your playing preferences. There's absolutely no guarantees when it comes to your level of enjoyment in this game. I can't stress that enough. But if I'm able to help you when it comes to choosing a commander option that is going to make it easier for you in the long term, maybe you don't have to spend as much money because you're going with the same exact commander for years, but that commander happens to be very flexible, like an Oloro, like a Prosh, where you don't have to spend a whole lot of money to make the deck good, but over the course of years you've just added to it bits and pieces, made it a little bit more competitive, but you probably have a good functioning commander deck when it's all said and done, which yet again adds to the whole experience of commander. If you want to know why a lot of people like commander, it's not necessarily the competitive nature or the lack of a competitive nature, but rather the deck building experience itself. I know a lot of people who don't play that much commander, but they just like the deck building because it's such a challenge for some people. Going with a singleton format built around one specific commander seems to be where a lot of people find that enjoyment. And it's a lot easier for me to go with a commander where there's so many different options rather than one that is very narrow, which is why I've said in the past I'm not the biggest fan of Voltron decks. They just lack creativity to me. Not every single one of them. There's some like SRAM that are a little bit more unique, allow you to draw some cards, make it a little bit more easier to play that deck, but for the most part, Voltron seems to lack creativity, and a lot of people have said the same exact thing for tribal decks. They don't seem to have anything unique beyond just the tribe itself, and it's very hard to add to those decks, especially if it's a random creature type that's likely not going to get much more support But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you think about linear versus non-linear commanders. I definitely want to hear what you have to say. This is something I feel is very important, especially for newer players. If you're not a newer player, then I don't know why you were watching this video. I just made this video because in real life and on the internet, I get a lot of people that are maybe frustrated with this game or just commander. They don't understand how different commanders work, or they have unrealistic expectations when they choose a certain commander and expect it to hold up against other more powerful commanders in the format. So definitely, if you thought this video was helpful, hit the like button, leave a comment, do whatever you want to do. As always, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.